This video is brought to you by our own Meta. Thank you so much for donating. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.
Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a tower defense game in Unity. Today we're going to be creating some cool effects for our laser. So in the last video I suggested that you could leave a comment if you wanted to see some more particle effects, glowing, lighting kind of stuff. And you guys left so many comments, so I thought that I would go ahead and dedicate this video to exactly that topic. That also means that we will push the topic of slowing down enemies to the next video. I tried to squeeze everything into this one, but thought it was just too much and I wasn't able to explain things properly. So we'll do it this way, and yeah, it's going to be really cool. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity, and really what I want to do is just bring our turret into the scene so that we can work on it. So let's find our prefabs folder. And let's find our laser beamer and just drag it into the scene and focus on it here. And what I realized kind of since the last video is that this yellow color here looks really bad. So what we're going to do is change it to more of a green lasery feel. So if we just select our laser beamer here and then change the start color to some kind of almost bluish green. And I actually want to bring the alpha down quite a bit on that one. And then take the end color and just do a full on Hulk green there. And let's bring down the alpha just a tiny bit on that as well, just to make it a little bit more transparent and cool looking. And we can maybe just change the gradient a tiny bit. I actually think that looks much cooler already. And what we'll then do is just hit apply on that. And when we combine these with the other effects that we're going to be creating, this is going to look awesome. We're going to create this cool glowing effect using some additive particles and then a light, a point light. Yeah, so what I wanted to do is kind of make the first effect, and that's going to be based around kind of the bullet impact effect here in the same style. So let's just again use this as a template or as a starting point, and let's rename this to laser impact effect, something like that. And we can then drag, actually we don't need to turn this into a separate prefab. I'm debating on whether or not to do this. Actually, I think I'm going to do it just for now. And what I want to do is change, put back on looping here, because currently you can see this is emitting in these bursts, and we actually just want to get rid of that and then bump the emission rate up to something like 10, because this is going to be a continuous stream of particles flowing off of the impact on the enemy. And let's also change the shape here, because currently it's emitting in a sphere of a radius of 0.2. And let's instead make this emit in a cone so that it looks like it's coming from this point that we've hit on the enemy. So something like that is actually pretty good. We can actually expand this a tiny bit. And I don't think we need to do much tweaking on this. One thing that I do want to change is definitely the material. So let's go and create a new material for this. Let's go right click and then material. And we'll call this one laser impact. And we can find our laser impact effect, find our renderer tab and just drag it right in there. There we go. And then we can change this around. So let's find our laser impact and let's make this a very bright green. Something like this, with a bit of metallicness to it, and bump down the smoothness. And then we can do a tiny bit of emission, and what this will do is just kind of boost the entire color here a tiny bit. So just make everything a bit brighter. And I really like that effect because it almost makes it look like it's glowing. And we can just disable global illumination. That's not why we're using the emission there. And so I think this looks fairly good. And let's find our laser impact effect, and let's actually make these a bit bigger. So let's do between 0.25 and 0.4, because I want these to be really clear, and also change the lifetime down to 1. So I actually really like this effect already, and I think it's going to look cool as soon as we put it on there. So let's just do that, except for one thing, and that is if we go under collision, and my phone is actually going off here, so I'm just going to disable that and watch there. There we go. So if we go under collision, you can see that we could just go ahead and bump up our radius scale to make them not go through the ground but just land on top of it. And we'll also go in here and change this collides with everything, because I think at this point we have so many particles in our level. I mean, we have these particles, we have whenever we create turrets, we have when our enemies die, we have whenever they're hit by bullets and missiles, and all of that, and a lot of them are colliding with the environment. So what I thought we'll do is just narrow down what they're actually able to collide with, because I don't think that we need to have them collide with players or other turrets or anything like that. In fact, our turrets don't even have colliders. So what we'll do is we'll just create a layer for all of the nodes and all of the ground elements here that these particles will actually collide with. So let's just go ahead and find our nodes and just select our entire nodes empty object here, and the environment as well with all of the ground planes here. Just select those two, go to layer, add a new layer, and we'll just call this one something very broad like environment. And we'll select those two and just change the layer here to environment. And this hit yes, change children, and all of the individual objects will now have that layer. And that means that if we go to a laser impact effect, we can go and change collides with from everything to only the environment here. That just does a bit of optimization behind the scenes, and it's a nice thing to do if you're, especially if you have troubles with performance. Cool. So I like the effect of these now, and I think we're actually ready to try and implement them. So let's go ahead and do that. And what we'll do is we'll add a glow and we'll add a light as well, but we'll just begin with these just to show you how we're going to do it. So I'm going to remove the laser in front of the name, and I'm actually going to go ahead and remove the prefab here. Now we've lost the prefab connection, but that's perfect because I want these to go inside of the laser beamer object itself. So I want these to just be a part of the laser beamer object. And what we'll then do is we'll have them snap onto the position of the enemy that we're currently targeting. So we'll just have them follow that enemy. And then we can enable and disable or stop and play this particle system whenever we're actually shooting and not shooting. Cool. So we'll, in order to do this, we'll have to modify our turret a bit. So let's just double click that to open it up in Visual Studio, and we'll just have to throw in a bit of code. It's really not much. First of all, we of course need a reference, which we'll create down here to our particle system. So let's do a public particle system, and this is going to be our impact effect. And we can then go down here where we say laser, and then down under our laser here, you can see that we say if line renderer is not enabled, then we want to go ahead and enable it. And we'll just add a bit more code to this. So let's now wrap it in some curly brackets. And we just want to go, if we need to enable the line renderer, well, then we also need to enable the particle system. And we do that by simply going impact effect.play. And you might think that you want to go .enabled here, just like we do with the line renderer, enable emission or whatever, or just enable and disable the entire component. But that is not something that the particle system allows for. Using play and stop actually means that the particle system is going to keep the particles that they have spawned and just stop it from emitting more particles. So that's why we're using these functions here, because you don't want the particles to suddenly disappear as soon as it stops firing. Awesome. So that's going to play. And then of course we need it to stop as well. And we do that up here. We say if line renderer.enabled, in case we don't have a target, well then we want to disable it. Again, we'll just add a tiny bit of code to this that simply stops the particle system. So let's put that in there, and then let's say impact effect.stop. Cool. And then finally, we need the particle system to follow the position of our target as he moves around. So in order to do this, we'll use target.position, just like we do here. And we can simply go impact effect.transform.position equals target.position. However, there are a few issues with this, and let's have a look at what they are. So let's reference our impact effect here, hit apply, and let's try and see what happens now if we hit play and we wait for an enemy to spawn in. And you can see here that the particles are actually there, but it's not looking too great. And the reason why here is you can see the particle system has snapped to the center of our enemy, when in fact we want it to snap to the point that we hit, something right about there. So how do we do this? And as well, we need the particle system to point back towards our turret, because if we hit it right on here, the particles would bounce back. So we need this to be rotated so that our blue arrow here actually points in the direction of our turret. So that's what we're going to do. So in order to achieve this, well, the first thing is actually fairly easy. We could just offset the particle system, and we can even do this inside of Unity, but I think we'll do it through code. And the second thing is just rotating the entire prefab. So let's have a look at this. So the first thing that we want to do is get a vector that points from the position of our enemy towards the position of our turret. So it points backwards from the way that we are shooting. And the way that we do this, whenever we want to get the direction from one point to another, say we want to go from A to B, we just go the position of B minus the position of A. So in our case, we want to have a vector 3, which we'll call dir for direction, and we want to set that equal to, so we want to go from the enemy to the turret position, so we go turret position minus enemy. So we just go transform, and actually it's the fire point's position, not our transform. So fire point dot position minus target dot position. So now we have a direction that points back towards our turret. And what can we use this for? Well, first off, we could use it to rotate our impact effect. So we could go impact effect dot transform dot rotation, and then we want that rotation to be equal to quaternion.look rotation, and that is a function that takes a direction, some vector with some direction, and points in that direction. So we want to point in this direction, in the dir here. So we want to point towards the turret. So that's going to set that up just fine. And then of course with the position here, we now can't just set this directly equal to target.position. We want to move a tiny bit in the direction. So if we have a look at this, so imagine that our enemy is here and that our turret is over here. Well, we don't want to be inside of the enemy. In fact, we want to move 0.5 units towards our turret, because the radius of our enemy is exactly 1. That means that if we start inside the enemy, we'll have to move 0.5, half of 1, in order to get to the edge of our enemy. So what we want to do is we want to add our direction onto this, and we want to make sure that our direction is exactly 1 unit long, and then we want to multiply that with 0.5. So if this doesn't make too much sense to you, that's because this is some vector mathematics specific stuff. Normalizing a vector means reducing the length to 1, and then multiplying with the scalar means that all of the different axes will then be multiplied with that. It's a bit technical. If you want to learn more about mathematics and vectors and how they apply to games, I suggest you check out my recent video in Game Math Theory on vectors. It's the first one in the series, and yeah, you can just find it on the channel, Game Math Theory on vectors. So now that we have this should actually move it a bit back for us. So if we go and hit, and wait for Unity there, oh, awesome. So let's hit apply here, and if we try and hit play now, we should actually see this working. So you can see that it totally works. However, one thing we forgot to do was set the impact effect here to simulation space world. So we need to do that in order for the particles to stay in place whenever the particle system moves. And now you can see we have this cool looking effect right here. So I actually really like that effect, and everything seems to be going just fine. Cool. So if we just hit pause here, you can see now if we inspect this impact effect, that it is in fact pointing towards a turret, and that it is in fact, whoa, this is in fact not placed totally accurately. So why is this happening? Let's just have a look if we just go forward a few frames. So for some reason it doesn't move it all the way out from the center. And there might be a few reasons for this. Let's try actually removing the 0.5 here. So let's try that again. That looks better, much better. Okay, the reason for this is I actually thought that the radius of these balls oh, you can see it scaled 2 by 2 by 2. That's the reason why. I thought the radius was 0.5, meaning that the entire length from one side to another would be 1, but that is in fact 2, so we don't have to multiply down here. All right, so that fixed that issue. Cool, so now let's actually add some bit more exciting stuff to this. So let's find our impact effect, and let's go in here and create this cool looking glow. And in order to do this, what I want to do is just bring an enemy inside the scene so we can easily preview what's going on. So let's just bring in an enemy here. Let's take our impact effect and let's copy the transform of our enemy and paste the position. We can actually do that. So we'll just paste all of the values and then we'll put the scale here back to 1, 1, 1 and then move it out here just so we can see what this looks like on top of our enemy. There we go. Awesome. So what I want to do is actually create a child prefab or a child object to this impact effect that is also going to be a particle system. And the cool thing about this is that Unity, whenever you have nested particle systems like this and you control the state of the first one, will go ahead and control the state of the child objects as well. So that means that when we play and pause our impact effect, the sub-particle systems, this one is going to be played and stopped as well. So let's go ahead and rename this to glow. And we of course want to change this quite a bit. So the first thing that I want to do is just change the speed down to 0. We don't want it to move at all actually. And I want to just disable the shape, and what that means is it will no longer emit in some kind of shape. It will just emit from the single point that is right here. And then we can go to our emission here, and actually I think I'm going to leave it at 10 for now, and we'll change the lifetime to something like 0.3 so you can see what that does. Now what I want to do is I want to create a material for these particles. So let's go material and let's call this one laser glow. And let's find the glow object. Let's go under renderer and let's put in our laser glow. And I actually still want to use the default particle here. So we still want to go under particles, but we want this to be additive. And when we then choose the texture default particles, you can see this nice glowing effect that creates. So I really like the feel of that. And let's bump up the soft particles factor. Let's bump up the alpha channel here. Maybe even make it a bit brighter, just to really make it pop. And then we can find our glow here, and we can definitely increase the start size. So increase it to something like 3 even. And then let's create a color for this, and this is going to be totally green. So something like this looks really, really cool. So it really looks radiating almost. It's definitely not something that you want to be near. And I really like the effect that we're getting here. So all of the other attributes, I believe we can leave just fine. And one thing that I want to go and do is just go under color over lifetime, enable that, and just have it fade out over its lifetime. And this will introduce some jitter here. You can see that this is flashing on and off. That's actually an effect I really, really like. Whenever it's hitting here, I don't want the glow to be constant. I want it to feel alive and weird looking. So I really think that accomplishes that, and it also makes it look much nicer when we then stop the particles. Okay, when we stop the emission of the particles, it will just fade out really quickly. So I like the effect we are getting here, and the last thing that I wanted to do is just have a light in here as well. So let's do a light, point light, and we'll leave all of the settings. I like the range at 10, but we want to increase the intensity to something like 3, and take the color, of course, and make it super green as well. Something like that looks super cool, and we can just call this one our light, and we'll have the glow there. Everything looks cool. Let's hit play. or hit apply on the prefab. And one thing you will notice now, if we just go ahead and delete our laser beam here, actually let's just keep it, but let's delete our enemy. One thing that you will notice is that we don't have a way of enabling and disabling our light. So we'll have to create that in just a second. But if we hit play now, we should see this working. And I actually really like the feel of this. So you can see what that does. Might want to turn down or tone down the glow a tiny bit. I think it's a bit too much, so let's just find our impact effect here. And what we could do in order to tone this down is actually just move it in a tiny bit, so it doesn't sit so far outside of the enemy. We can also maybe just take the start size and randomize it a tiny bit. So random between two constants, and we can make it go between 2 and 3. I think that gives it a much more organic feel to the glow there. So let's try and hit apply to that. And let's hit play. And again, let's see how this looks. Yeah, so I think that made it a lot better. And I really like the look and feel of that. Cool. So the last thing that I kind of wanted to do was just, of course, enable and disable this light. So if we now double click our turret script, we need a reference to the light. We're going to make this a public light, and this is going to be our impact light. And one thing that you could do if you want to nest a lot of different objects in here and have different animations, you could just create one super object, just like we have the impact effect here, that has an animator component, and you can do a bunch of different animations. And then instead of enabling and disabling the particle system, you could just switch between animations. So you could have lights that did different things, you could have different particle systems and animate them over time. That's something you could do, but I don't think we need to get that crazy with it. So let's find our laser here, and where we play our impact effect, we also want to go light.enabled. Actually not light.enabled, we want to go impact light.enabled equals true. And up here, where is it there? Where we stop our impact effect, we also want to go impact light.enabled equals false. There we go. And the last thing that we could do is have the glow effect here be pre-warmed, but I actually don't think this is necessary. I don't think there's a problem with this being just a tiny bit off, but you could check the pre-warm here if you want it to be really apparent just from the very beginning. So let's hit apply on that, and let's hit play. And I'm just gonna, whoops, of course we need to reference the impact light. So let's go light here and drag it under the impact light field. And I'll now maximize the game view, hit play, and you can see that it instantly disappears. And there we go. We have this really nice looking lasery effect. So that is basically all that I wanted to show in this video. I'm sorry that I couldn't squeeze in all of this slowing down of enemies and the damaging over time. But if that's something you want to experiment playing with on your own, you are free to do that. There's plenty of help to find on the forums. And if not, we will definitely, and this time I promise, have a look at that in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this video and thought that playing around with lasers is just as fun as I do. And without further ado, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much to all of the awesome people who donated in September, and a special thanks to Aaron Meta, Robert Roche, James Calhoun, Kim Rose Gugos, Bao Andan Duang, and Vixian P. Thank you so much for donating. You guys are awesome. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.